my name is Lauren. I'm one of the founders of First Light Widowed Association, and I've been widowed almost 9 years now. I'd like to welcome you back to Widow Talk, though today it's Widower Talk because we're joined by Chris Martin, a widower, father of two, and the author of Just a Dad blog. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, look, thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So before we get into it, we're going to talk all things grief, widowhood, being a solo dad. But can you tell us how it was that you came to be a widower?
Yeah, look, I was happily married with one 4-year-old daughter at the time, with Grace. Everything was fine and dandy. And one day, that's a long story, the whole diagnosis, but essentially at 37 years old, my wife, Renee, was diagnosed with incurable stage 4 kidney cancer that had metastasized. We were currently 16 weeks pregnant with our soon-to-be baby boy at the time. And it was about 3 or 4 weeks before Christmas in 2012. And
Wow.
sort of threw us into a real spin, yeah. And they sort of said, look, one of the hard things was the doctor said, look, to get treatment started as soon as possible, to give Renee the best possible chances, why don't you go home, enjoy Christmas, and when we see you early January, just tell us whether you're going to keep the baby or not. So that's where it all started. And look, she fought on for 28 months. We found out later on that the diagnosing doctor only thought that she'd last 3 months, but she went for 28 months. We managed to have our baby boy, Albie, and she was around to see his second birthday, and then Easter Saturday it was, in 2015, April the 4th, she just, her body just couldn't keep going any longer, and all of a sudden, here I am, thrust into being a solo dad and a widow at the same time of a 6-year-old girl, 6-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy.
Wow.
So yeah, wasn't exactly an awesome time.
No, definitely not what we planned for. Look, I'm really sorry that you lost Renee and your children lost Renee, but I'm incredibly grateful that you're so open with your grief with me today and on your blog, because I know widowers are out there, but in all the kind of widow communities that I have sought out, I don't come across many. And you're in fact the first Aussie widower that I had an in-depth conversation with. I've met one before, and it was at a meetup for widowed people. And then as soon as we started sharing our stories and sharing our grief, it was, well, let's not talk about that sad stuff. Let's just have a beer and have a good time. And I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, so, it's hard to come by. There's not many widowers in the online support community. And I was just wondering, why do you think that is? What are your thoughts there?
Well, yeah, look, I had exactly the same experience. Obviously, after Renee passed away, and I sort of, my mind sort of got back into it. I thought, well, I'd try and search out some familiar or similar circumstances. And yes, there's an absolute plethora of widow support areas and things out there. And there are men out there, widowers involved, but we just don't speak. And I think that harkens back to, and not even just Australian, but to that age-old gender-based thing of men are tough, men don't talk, men don't share their feelings, they suck it up and get on with it, and who wants to listen to a whinging old man anyway? And I just thought that was just not right, and I think that's half the problem. Then as I sort of delved a little bit more into it, of course you start coming across statistics and things like that, and one of the reasons that male suicide is so huge, particularly in Australia, is isolation, and we don't reach out, we don't look for help, and unfortunately a lot of men feel that the easiest way out is just to not be here anymore rather than look for help, because that's the way that society, I suppose, historically has programmed it to be, is that men are just tough, suck it up, you know, the best we'll ever do is maybe over one too many beers down at the pub on a Friday, we might blurt something out, and then usually it's a pat on the back and she'll be right, mate. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
tomorrow's another day, and it's just, that's not right. And I was just I suppose I was envious of the support network out there for women. And it's a really, really hard one to do because there's so much equality and issue with gender roles and things in today's society. It's really hard to sort of speak up without being slammed down. But yeah, it's just, it's tough because and the more I sort of started with my blog and things, the more I would get women particularly saying, "Oh, I've got a friend, I know this guy, and my brother and my brother-in-law, my uncle, my this." And there's heaps of guys out there, but there's just no communication, no community or networking behind it all. So hence why I sort of kicked everything off. Yeah.
So how long after losing Renee did you start the Just a Dad blog, and have you had much response from other men?
Yeah, look, it took me 2 years, 2017, actually, I just passed the 3-year anniversary. So I think it was, so where are we? It must have been late May 2017. I'd been rattling on to my brother and to a few other people. And it was actually my brother just turned around and said, "For God's sake, Chris, would you just start writing? I'm sick of hearing about it."
Yeah.
And so I did. And yeah, the response was immediate. And funnily enough, you bring up, have I had much response from men? If you trawl through all the comments on my Facebook page and through my blogs and everything, it's 99% women saying, "Well done, it's really good to hear the voice of a man in a circumstance like this." But if you have a look, if I gave you access to my private messages, it would probably be weighted towards men who send me a message and go, "Mate, I don't comment. I've been reading your blog for a couple of years. This thing you just wrote really resonated with me. Thanks for doing so much." And And look, as far as I'm concerned, if I can write an article or share something that I get one response from one man that says, "Well, that's helped me," then as far as I'm concerned, that's job done, because that's what we don't do. And that's just atypical of particularly online, I think, as well. Men, it's all about humour and filth and blokeism. But behind the scenes, they're just as feeling as anybody else. Yeah,
absolutely. So, in starting the blog, you've obviously, you're helping other people, but has it been helpful for you and your own grief? Like, has it helped you along the way?
Oh, look, 100%. It started off as much as a cathartic exercise for me as it was to help others. And I figured the things that I'd been reading, the things that helped me, were reading about other people's real life journeys, not like not a dissertation or a PhD or PhD thesis on grief and men, but just reading other people's real life experiences and identifying with them. Even it was the one point in an article or a story that I may have read. So I thought, I'd made the move from Melbourne up to here, up to the Byron Bay area, and I was, constantly getting a lot of, emails and texts saying, "You okay? Is everything all right?" And I thought, well, I may as well just put it out there where I am and what I'm doing, to keep more friends and family in place. But yeah, 100%. I didn't realise how cathartic it could be, and that's why I encourage anyone, particularly men, just to write it, even if they don't share it online in a public forum like I do. Just write it down, put it down. Just as soon as it's out of your head, it's a huge thing. And obviously, for me, to put it out into the public forum, the comments I get are just so soothing and healing in itself. Realizing that, hey, I'm not insane. I'm not going crazy. This is normal. This is okay. And how I feel is how I feel, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. I had a similar experience as soon as I started to communicate and meet other widowed people. That validation of, okay, I'm not going crazy. This is just part of the experience, and it's grief. And then from that, I started to feel stronger. So that's brilliant. You're an open book on your blog, and you've mentioned that in conversation before. I wonder, with the blog or just in your or the sharing on Facebook and things like that, have you ever encountered difficulties with perhaps the widowed community or non-widowed people, friends, family, judging you in your grief, or potentially even judging you as a solo dad?
Yeah, absolutely. In early days, it sounds like I'm an old man. I've had this for it's only been 5 years, but yeah, in the early days, I was sort of, I suppose, you're uber aware of what other people are, how they're viewing it and how they're watching. And people do watch a little bit more until I guess now I feel like I've proved myself to not the naysayers, but the people that judge and would like to help. Anything else? I've had quite a few instances where I might have where I've written something online, as you said, because I'm an open book, and what I think is what I think, and I've had to defend myself saying this is my opinion, this is how I feel. I understand you're that way, particularly from a lot of women, sort of almost sort of shouting me down with things like, "Hey, women do this too, mothers do this too," and I've had to respond saying, "I know, but I'm just trying to put this out as from a male perspective because we don't do this, and I just want guys out there to know that we all do this as well.
Yeah.
We all go through this as well." But yeah, the judgment's a hard one to deal with because you're so self-judgmental as it is. The hardest thing is when somebody else is sort of, passing judgment on you as well. And I think it's just one of those unfortunate, it's just one of those things that happens when you're left, to sort of run the show on your own, that people do look at you under a microscope until you've proven yourself. And it's that's I think that's a general problem in society these days anyway, where it's you're sort of deemed guilty and you have to prove your innocence. Whereas this case, you're sort of deemed unworthy until you can prove your worthiness. And it's a real sad indictment on society itself, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, in those early days of your widowhood, you mentioned on your blog that you were a very hands-on father. Did that mean that you were trusted in your capacity to care for your two children without Renee? And I know you've relocated from Melbourne to the north coast of New South Wales. How did that go down with your in-laws? Are they still in your life? Sorry, I've just thrown like 3 questions at you there.
All right, that's okay. Look, yeah, I think, yeah, as you mentioned, like I was, always a very hands-on dad. So as far as the day-to-day running of the household, I wasn't really doing anything more than I normally was, but I was just doing it all, which was, obviously a bit more than I was used to. So I don't think there was any concern for people about whether I could feed the kids, whether I could keep the house clean, whether I could get them off to school and that. But I think there was probably some concern how I would deal with the situation, them losing their mum and me losing my wife, because I'm also very, pretty light-hearted in my approach to life. Very that typical Australian bloke. I'm very, she'll be right, and no, that's okay, and all that. So I think people might have been a bit concerned, and I just do that in my way. That's I suppose my public-facing personality. And as we all know, behind closed doors is a different scene. So I think that was a bit of, people were sort of waiting to see how the kids and I would cope emotionally and mentally after it all. And look, yeah, the move up to here, that was presented to me, and I sort of let a few factors be the deciding factors, and we came up here then. And luckily for me, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and her partner and their 2 beautiful girls down in Melbourne are still very much a part of my life and always will be. As far as I'm concerned, my only mother-in-law I'll ever have, and my only sister-in-law I'll have. Even if I do meet somebody else, they're my sort of number one, and they're super supportive. They were quite, a bit upset about, us coming up here, but the beautiful people that they are sort of said, we understand this is your journey. If this is something you need to do, you go and do it, and we'll still be here. And yeah, like we chat and talk all the time, and they've been nothing but the perfect in-laws, I suppose. So yeah, it's a few friends I've had more of an issue with than the in-laws. I can't believe you're leaving us, and I can't believe you're going up there, and when are we ever going to get to see you again? But that's, I think, it's no different than a family moving away to have their own family time. It wasn't like I was escaping anything down there. I was just looking for a monumental change, because the monumental thing had happened to us, and I felt like everything was just returned to normal and going around us, and I couldn't believe that everything has just sort of picked up where it left off where we hadn't. So we made the change to come up here as I suppose a drastic answer to a drastic situation.
Yeah. Did it help you in your grief? Like kind of give a fresh start, or gave the way to like move forward, not move on, but move forward in life?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think that's what it was. I think, look, we moved up. I made the decision. We moved up the start of 2016, and I think I'd made the decision by November in 2015. So it was only sort of 6 months, but in that 6 months, I just felt like there was just too many memories, too many attachments, every time you look out the window, look at this, watch this TV show, see that person, go to that cafe. It was just all a trigger, and not necessarily a trigger that would make me break down in tears, but just a memory of a life that was tainted with sadness and despair. And I think moving up here was, like you said, was a clean slate, and I really sort of embraced that. I'm a new person up here, even if I was a lot who I am, but people didn't see me and know me as, the guy that's just lost his wife. They saw me as a new face in the region, and it wasn't, I've had friends that, have only just found out 6 months ago, after knowing me for 5 years, that the reason I come up here is because I lost my wife. And people's opinion and approach to you change so much when they know what you've been through. And I just wanted to brush that off a bit and just try and return a bit of normalcy. And then that could be some information that people would find out in due course, rather than be the defining thing about who we are and why we're doing what we're doing.
Brilliant. So still focusing, I guess, on those early days of your grief, was there anything that you did to, I guess, kind of push down the grief or push it away? I know in the first 2 years of my grief, I would drink a lot, just wait for the weekend to come around and buy, 6 bottles of wine, and that was my weekend, and Monday, Tuesday, and I reached a point where I knew I got to stop avoiding this, and I got to cut this crap out, otherwise it's going to completely ruin my life. Was there anything like that? Like, did you do any kind of grief avoidance or anything?
Oh, look, 100%. I think anybody that's anybody that's lost somebody they love would be essentially lying if they didn't have some kind of avoidance strategy. And I was quite similar to you, Lauren. I would drink too much. I felt like I was just waiting for the clock to tick. I was waiting for the kids to go to school, waiting for them to get home, waiting for when they go to bed, when would I get myself to my time. I'd have, my mum and my mother-in-law would come up to see us on a Friday night because I had, dinner at a friend's house, and I'd come home Sunday. And I was just in a really sort of self-destructive pattern, which I think's normal for grief avoidance, because it's like I was saying before, it's such a catastrophic thing. I really don't think in those initial times, it's just so much for you to try and sink and understand that a lot of the time you can't comprehend it, you can't think about it, you don't know how to deal with it, so you just try and blur it out a bit. And whether that's like you and I, through substance abuse in some form, or whether it's taking off overseas and just avoiding reality full stop, or whatever. There's so many different avoidance measures, but unfortunately for me, I did, and that was one of the major catalysts in me wanting to sort of get away. Is that at the time I couldn't see how I would curtail that behaviour. So to have something like a move or a big drastic thing sort of refocused my energy onto a different outcome other than just treating the same wheel, I suppose.
Was there any kind of event or point where that kind of made you realize I got to stop this? And did you engage in any counseling, or what was it that helped you sort of move on to dealing with it rather than avoiding it?
Yeah, look, I think I'm not a huge, this is just me personally, but I'm not a huge fan of counselling and things like that. It's just, I feel like I know myself well enough to know how, what, where and when about everything. But I think it was a random weekday, and I think I just spent the day lolling around the house in my pajamas, watching TV, you know, waiting until I had to get dressed to go and pick up the kids to come home again, so then I could crack a drink. And I think I had a couple of cheeky glasses of wine with with my lunch, and I sort of realised that I'd been doing it for weeks on end, and I just thought it's just not sustainable. This is not the person I am. I was avoiding phone calls, avoiding emails. I just no communication at all. And I think I just realised it was when I had to go and pick up the kids, and they were happy to see me. So I had Albie still with me, but to go and pick up Grace, and they wanted to go and play. They wanted to go into the park, and I was finding reasons not to. And I just felt like this is not fair on them, And I really think, and I've mentioned this before in some things I've written, that I'm pretty sure if it wasn't for if I didn't have the kids, I can't see a reason why I probably wouldn't have joined Renee already in my apathy towards life, full stop. And they gave me a reason to keep going. They gave me a reason to pull out of it. And they also showed me that, kids are so involved, so in the present, that they don't worry too much about the future. They don't dwell on the past too much. If they do, it's momentary. Momentary. Yeah. And then it's over in the flash, and they want to be doing something now. And that in hindsight has been a huge lesson for me, in that, if you're stressed out and worried, anxious, it's about something in the future that you can plan, but you can't predict, you can't control. No. And if you're really down in the dumps and depressed, it's about something that has happened and you can't change that. So you miss out on the presence. And with children, that's a huge one. If you miss out on the presence with the children, and I still do this to this day, like I pick myself up and I find myself not being present enough for the kids, and that's what they need. And that's a huge lesson, I think, for us adults, is to be more in the moment.
Yeah. So just on the topic of your children, they were quite young when you lost Renee. Gosh, Albie was 2?
2, yeah. And Grace was 6.
That must have been hard. Like, you would have been feeling tremendous grief, and you've got these kids to care for. Like, yes, they helped you keep going, but just, I remember that time, the shock and just the harsh reality of your spouse just not coming back. And I didn't have children that I had to care for. I had dogs, but they're a little bit easier to care for. I mean, that must have been really, really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, like you mentioned, you're trying to process your own grief, devastation as it is, but to try and have to micromanage the kids as well. And I think, again, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but I think what was good about it was, I think when something so devastating happens to you, to the children, to anything, it's so big, you can't deal with it all at once. You can't do that. So I was always very open, and still am very open with my emotions around the kids. If I'm upset about mummy or a happy moment or anything, I'll cry, and they're okay with it. They're a bit shocked, the first few times, particularly Grace, because she was older. And Albie doesn't like seeing me cry. He just runs up and just starts crying himself or hits me. But yeah, I think just by being open and honest, and when I felt something, allowing myself to feel that, empowers them, or empowered them, and does empower them to do the same. I'm not one to sort of, hush up and be quiet if you're upset, or get over it. It's just fine. This is how you're feeling at the moment. Process it. Let's work it out. Yeah. And I think I mentioned to you the other day, it maybe coin a term called micro-grieving. Yeah. And I think that's been huge for all of us. And there's varying, like, we're all different, totally different people. I'm a bit of a hard on the sleeve sort of guy. So is Albie. Grace is an emotional black hole. It takes a lot to let it out. Yeah. But dealing with feelings when they come along, letting that feeling out, encouraging that feeling to out, and then coming, not a resolution, but acknowledging that feelings, just acknowledging the feeling and then letting it go naturally when it happens is been a huge, I suppose, not a strategy, but something I've just done with the kids and with myself. And I think that's been probably the number one way I've helped them through this at all, because it all happens to us all different times, happens for different reasons. And I just think that to try and force the issue, or which I used to do with Grace, is to sort of poke and prod, and what are you feeling about mum? You're a bit upset, and she just boom, shut down, and nah, I'm fine, sort of thing. But then I allow them the space to feel when they feel, and it comes out, and that's when we cope and sort of deal with it and just talk it through. Yeah.
And how are Grace and Albie, like, how do they cope with, I guess, conversation about Renee? And I imagine Albie wouldn't have memories of his mother. So how does he respond to people speaking of their memories of her?
Yeah, well, Grace is she's quite dismissive of it, which I must admit I am as well. I'm not too sure about yourself, but I think it's a pretty common thing with in the widow community when people speak about it. Quite often, you don't want to dredge up those feelings, or you don't. You're in a happy mood. You don't feel like talking about it at the moment. So, oh no, it's okay, and you push away. So Grace is good at that. Poor little Elbs, though. You're right. He doesn't have too many memories, so he's forever. Oh, was I like this with mum, and did I do that with mum, and how is mum with this, and can you show me a photo of mummy? I forget what she looks like, which breaks my heart when he does that. But he's very sensitive about when people bring it up, and he's at the age now, seven years old. So for the last year or two, and I can imagine for the next few years, kids are just quite blunt and don't really have much care for other kids' emotions, particularly if they want to hurt them. So yeah, he will still to this day gets really quite upset if people sort of bring it up. And I tell him that's okay. I tell him not to. Yeah, he doesn't get angry about it; it just upsets him. And I think a lot of the sadness for him is because he doesn't have those core memories of it. So I just find it really important to have photos around the house, and every now and then we find some videos and play it back so we can hear her voice and things like that. But yeah, they really, Albie's really sensitive about it, and I've had to speak to teachers and to other parents about just sort of careful, because it's a really touch point for him. And my concern with Grace is more about now she's coming into her teenage years, that she's going to really miss that or feel that hole of not having a female influence, particularly a mum who she was really close with as well in the house. So it's a long journey yet, but we seem to be getting there at the moment. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. Look, we're almost at the end of my list of questions. So I was just wondering if you could go back and give yourself some advice at the very beginning of this, or any advice to any other widower, whether he has children or not, what would that advice be on how to navigate this?
Wow, yeah, and that's a big one. It's huge, mainly or primarily because grief is such a personal and unique journey, and I think, and this ties in with what I'll say, is no one can tell you how to process grief. No one can tell you what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and when you should be doing it, because it is such a unique experience for everybody. So my advice for that is just to lean into it. When you feel something, feel it. Allow yourself to feel it. If you don't feel like doing anything, don't do anything. Just you've got to really live for yourself, and for your children as well. But don't ever think that you should be doing something other than what you're actually doing. Whatever you're doing at the moment is perfectly right for you and for the stage of life, not just grief, but the stage of life that you're in at the moment. And you'll get a lot of advice. A lot of people tell you should see a psychologist, you should do this, you should do that. If you feel like you should and you'll know it, trust your gut and your heart, and then allow your head to be a tool to make the final decision on it. But just trust how you feel, because your heart and your gut, you don't lie to yourself internally, and I think you'll know when you should be doing something and when you shouldn't. And I just think the best advice is just lean into everything. Which sounds strange, sounds like a bit of a buzzword, but it just means to allow yourself to process and do things that help you in your journey. when they come along. Don't repress it. Don't push it down. And for God's sake, guys, if you need to ask or speak to someone, just do it. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Everyone's here. Just reach out, because you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think that's brilliant advice. And thank you so much for being so open with us. And it's just so wonderful to finally hear from a widower. And yeah, lads, we won't bite and come and join us.
Absolutely.
So where can we find you, Chris?
Well, I've got a blog called justadad.me. I thought it was hilarious starting up that name when I did, but not many people can find it. But you'll find me probably most active on Facebook at I am just a dad, so it's I.m.justadad on Facebook, and that's where I post most of my things. I share the articles, and I'm also on Instagram as well, but it's sort of a syndication. So I am just a dad on Facebook, and justadad.me is my blog.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Please check out our website, firstlight.org.au. There you'll find your way to a community of support and resources on how to best support yourself or someone that you love after losing a spouse. So, Chris, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
To all our widows and widowers, we salute you. Have a great day. Bye.